Preface: The World Cult and You. This ebook, an exclusive only available in its entirety with a free 7-day trial or paid subscription at solluckman.substack.com, more or less, wrote itself, as often happens with my books. It came about, in its initial form anyway, as a series of interrelated articles on cults and cultism that just sort of came to me while contemplating how the reality game board functions, and that I decided to publish on my Substack over the summer of 2023. Let me tell you, those articles dissecting the workings of the world cult in general and truther cults in particular were like a series of hornets' nests tossed into the managed minds of the cultocracy. Stung cultists emerged from the shadows like MK Ultra-activated trolls defending their unquestioned beliefs, often, it would seem, following direct orders from their cult leaders, with a bewildering barrage of lies, insults, threats, shaming, labeling, libel, slander, scapegoating, and other lowbrow alternatives to thinking. Even in human life we have seen the passion to dominate, almost to digest, one's fellow, wrote C.S. Lewis, to make his whole intellectual and emotional life merely an extension of one's own, to hate one's hatreds and resent one's grievances and indulge one's egotism through him as well as through oneself. His own little store of passion must of course be suppressed to make room for ours. If he resists this suppression, he is being very selfish. My response posted on social media to this sad monster mash of, mostly, messenger attacking mixed with message ignoring was neutral and to the point. Good or bad, kind or mean, fair or not. Any reaction on your part to my recent article series on the danger of doomsday cults means I'm over the target. Although I also gained my share of new readers and supporters, rare indeed was it that the indoctrinated took the time to eschew ad hominem insults. Even if they read my material, which they hardly ever did thoroughly, and provide thoughtful criticism of my actual words. When they did, I took it to heart and scrutinized their viewpoint, occasionally going so far as to modify my own. Throughout this unpleasant and frankly depressing experience, I imagined I felt somewhat like Thoreau marching to the beat of his own drummer, even as his revolutionary ideas, which today seem so self-evident they're hardly even radical, brought down on his own head the foaming at the mouth of his fundamentalist, i.e., cultified, Concord neighbors. And like Thoreau, one of America's, perhaps the world's, greatest freethinkers and a personal hero of mine, I endeavored to take my own advice as provided herein. I went about divesting my person and energy to the best of my ability from every cult, large and small, obvious and hidden, I could, before simply, having said my piece and closed the book on the subject in this ebook, turning and walking away. The result of this summer, when I'd have gladly surfed more and cared less, wasted on today's prophets of doom and their cult followings, is The World Cult and You, where I've greatly expanded on my initial article series and also included 4 additional chapters, 2 completely new and previously unpublished in any form, for your consideration. I've also added a large number of new original memes to further illustrate and nuance this material. With luck, this ebook won't be wasted on you. May your own mind greet this collection of thought experiments as we do well to greet each day, open to the possibility of learning something new and changing our lives for the better. Experience the full ebook and audiobook only at solluckman.substack.com. Introduction. The nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they are acting on their own initiative. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is not free is apparent only to other people. Aldous Huxley. A company of believers is like a prison full of criminals. Their intimacy and solidarity is based on what they can least justify about themselves. John Updike. You have to quit confusing a madness with a mission. Flannery O'Connor. Introduction. You might be a cult member if, at the mention of the word cult, you might notice a kind of automatic revulsion, a possibly slight knee-jerk shiver that just rises up out of you, seemingly out of nowhere. Alternatively, you might find the word itself off-putting and observe that you're automatically inclined to dismiss it out of hand. I wish to start off this ebook of essays on cults and cultism by suggesting that these reactions themselves are evidence of cult programming. Through deep cultural hypnosis, as with the term conspiracy theory, allegedly introduced by the CIA to cover up their own shenanigans by putting people off the scent of their wrongdoing, cult has been cleverly programmed to make you instantly connect the word to the most egregious, nauseating examples of this pervasive social engineering phenomenon that can actually be, and indeed, usually is, far more nuanced and insidious. Some would say that society at large is a massive cult, one designed to entrain, through a variety of means both subtle and not so much, its members to restricted expressions of thought, belief, and action. The more I've considered this topic as dispassionately as possible while examining my own cultish connections, the more I've come to agree with the perspective that human civilization could be accurately described as, in fact, a world cult. If you ask me, it could hardly be more obvious that some kind of powerful mesmeric force is remote controlling the vast majority of human beings, including many of those entrenched in so-called truther communities. But even if we take a less wholesale approach to the subject, it's clear society is, at the very least, largely made up of innumerable cults. Religious ones, social ones, gendered ones, political ones, exopolitical ones, financial ones, ideological ones, cults of personality. The list, like Bilbo's endless road, goes ever on, and sadly, it just gets slipperier and slipperier. All cults, textbook or otherwise, cultivate essentially mindless, or other mindness, acceptance of sometimes unproven, often patently absurd and usually self-destructive ideas and accompanying acts. See the years from 2020 to 2022 for a pointed lesson in how shockingly effortless it is to induce worldwide cult formation with a staggering range of disempowering consequences that are continuing to do damage to the world and its people to this day. To be absolutely clear on this critically important point, the real danger with cults isn't their leaders, however delusional and/or despicable. It's their robotic foot soldiers who blindly believe in them and blithely do the dirty work, often against other cult members and usually without an iota of self-consciousness as to the inhumane savagery of their behavior. As I've observed by being on the receiving end as the unwelcome messenger to an extended community of cultists, the ferocity with which cult minions will defend their leaders' truth, without so much as considering the truth of others, is truly barbaric, making such genocides as the Crusades understandable. This all too common sort of reaction in cultists to being called out is a particularly nasty plot twist that has turned into little more than a cliché as lobotomized minions gleefully go to work throwing each other under the cult bus to please their megalomaniacal mind controllers, for precious little, except mental slavery, in return. To which I respond by quoting Khalil Gibran, who perfectly characterizes the zombified state of so many hypnotized cultists who seem straight out of The Walking Dead. Life without liberty is like a body without spirit. In addition to these few words, I offer the selection of darkly humorous original memes sprinkled throughout this text as possible points of departure for your own exploration of your personal relationship to cults and cultishness in what strikes me as the Golden Age. I myself have been tricked into ignoring my own eyes and ears in favor of what I wanted to see and hear in what was, in retrospect, undeniably a community with an overwhelmingly cultish vibe. And believe me when I say I paid the price for my own denial of what was right in front of me the whole time. Bizarrely, we benighted humans tend to learn as we burn. I flatter myself that my coming out of the cult closet, as it were, has been of value at least to some. A number of people with their own cautionary tales of this and other cults have come forward privately with gratitude and further insight, and I wish to thank them in return for their bravery in sharing the wisdom of their painful experiences. Below are a few questions well worth asking yourself if you're truly seeking to be sovereign in mind, body, and spirit. Otherwise, best of luck to you in the clown show. Question number 1. How deep does your individual hypnosis run? Question number 2. Where, how and to whom have you given away your power? Question number 3. Are you genuinely trying to break free, or merely waiting around for someone else to break you out? Experience the full ebook and audiobook only at solluckman.substack.com. Chapter 1. Be mindful while cultivating your interests that you don't find yourself in a cult. The only way out is in. Focusing on externals, however noble the intention, is just an intended distraction. Yours truly. As a former educator and devoted psychonaut exploring the fringes of consciousness for many years now, part of me resists putting this out there at the get-go, since I know many will resist the very notion, but here goes anyway in the interest of full disclosure. Far from being a universally positive characteristic, curiosity doesn't always lead to healthy outcomes. Some context. To contextualize my seemingly antithetical proposition, even though I've always had a fairly sensitive BS detector, I've nevertheless followed my own curious nose down several paths of knowledge, a problematic term at best, as I'll explain, only to realize, inevitably too late, that I'd been lured into the vestibule of a massive cult edifice. My teenage stint as a Southern Baptist, not because I loved Jesus but because the youth group and choir happened to be a blast, and my leftist indoctrination via prestigious liberal arts universities are two examples with which many probably can identify. There were literal impressive vestibules that ushered one into those beguiling environments. I don't know about you, but I have a weakness, one I strongly suspect now to be a form of cult indoctrination, for large-scale architecture that obviously costs a lot of money to construct and maintain. The only difference between a cult and a religion, said a very wise gentleman named Frank Zappa, is the amount of real estate they own. As my eponymous narrator phrases it in my forthcoming novel on the primacy of consciousness in an observer-generated construct such as ours, beginner's Luke, adventure of an imaginary lifetime. Fuck banks and churches united in the displays of power through ostentatiously redundant space. In this scene, Luke, who has become a slacker in the early 90s, is beginning to recognize, as many of us, reality researchers, are likewise doing nowadays, the bedrock of society for what it is, a colossal cult. My own biographical details aren't important, but the underlying lesson I eventually harvested from my time spent willingly participating in the giant loosh farm of the earth is potentially of tremendous value to any who would truly break free of the control matrix that, like the air we breathe, or don't, if you ask Morpheus, is all around us. In this thoroughly mind-manipulated world, in this realm literally produced by thought installations that create reality tunnels, a sad but true term, your own interests can and will be used against you. Is education a solution, or a problem? If the foregoing sounds like a warning not to overeducate yourself on any particular topic, perhaps it is, somewhat. Again, perish the thought. Yet here we are, thinking it, and for darn good reason. Over and above the myopia and navel-gazing induced by today's compartmentalization in education, followed by soul-suckingly unidimensional career paths, too much focus on a topic or area of expertise can lead you, whistling all the while, straight down the garden path, into a cult. I wish to emphasize that cults don't have to identify themselves as such. In fact, based on outward appearances, most cults don't act the part at all. The worst cults are the chameleons in society, the seemingly natural groupings of people for seemingly normal purposes that no one in their right mind should ever question. And these, I'm sorry to say, as it turns out, are the most diabolically underhanded of all. At the level of the inhuman and inhumane intelligence, the wrong mind, most people have downloaded, as I'll explain a bit later, scripting so-called collective reality. The disguise is absolutely intentional. It's part of the honey trap. And you're the target. You start, for example, with curiosity, a simple, childlike wish to know more about something, anything. Curiosity seems natural, and I suppose it is, or ought to be, and yet how easily we forget it was what killed the cat. Following your nose, you go deeper and deeper, and meet others with similar mindsets. And before you know it, you're identifying as part of a privileged group and engaging in what should properly be called groupthink. According to Wikipedia, which I'll be using throughout this ebook for expediency and accessibility only, not because I trust it, groupthink is sometimes stated to occur within natural groups within the community, for example to explain the lifelong different mindsets of those with differing political views, such as conservatism and liberals, in the US political context, or the purported benefits of teamwork versus work conducted in solitude. However, this conformity of viewpoints within a group does not mainly involve deliberate group decision-making, and might be better explained by the collective confirmation bias of the individual members of the group. This collective confirmation bias is the dead weight at the would-be heart and soul of cults large and small. I write would-be because deeply indoctrinated cult members have had much of their individuality and sovereignty of thought, word and deed, their heart and soul, replaced by, you guessed it, groupthink. This can happen in families as easily as in fanbases, in churches as effortlessly as in corporations. Leaders and followers. There may or may not be an identifiable leader in such scenarios. A powerful enough idea, by itself, can serve as the leader. And it often does.